And Amy, so Tiny Dancer has introduced this concept of a municipal card for Chicago residents who are in this country illegally. Municipal card.
Okay. Who wants to sign up for that?
Well, perhaps a lot of people. He said that the city will not retain any information about the individuals who apply and obtain this municipal card. This is in response to the pronouncements from Attorney General Sessions earlier this week that, at least with respect to the Department of Justice, cities who refuse to relinquish their designation as sanctuary communities, quote unquote, the new Orwellian term for that, by the way, in Chicago, per Tiny Dancer, welcoming city.
Oh.
Not a sanctuary city, welcoming city, you see. Because you can't be a welcoming city if you don't impede the immigration laws enforcement in this country. You see what he's doing there?
Yeah.
But that's the new wrinkle. What exactly will this municipal card provide in terms of protection or benefits? Unclear. But an ordinance is forthcoming.
I'm sure you keep it with you at all times, right?
And it's
like a driver's license.
Well, and it's so interesting to me, too, because, one, you've already got the sanctuary city designation, and police officers told not to ask about somebody's citizenship or inquire or do any inquiry into an individual's citizenship until and unless they're charged with
a crime,
some other additional crime, right? But it's interesting to me, the response, right? Juxtapose this. North Carolina Republicans caving to economic pressure on the bathroom bill. And Tiny Dancer and other big city mayors, de Blasio, others, doing the opposite to the economic pressure from the federal government in terms of, in the form of grants that their law enforcement agencies will or will not receive if they maintain their sanctuary city policy. It's interesting, how little the left cares about money and how obsessed some Republicans are about it. And one thinks that standing on principle, whatever they define as principle, is politically advantageous. That's why Tiny Dancer's doing it. That's why de Blasio's doing it. And the other group thinks surrender is politically advantageous. We found out in Illinois, I hate to break it to North Carolina Republicans, we know how that ends in Illinois. Take it from us here. When you consistently surrender to appease the other side, what actually happens is you're marginalized into super minority status, which is where the Republican Party has come to find itself in Illinois. So just a little heads up to North Carolina Republicans who think they're accomplishing something by surrendering their stated principles to the NCAA. But for more on the Sanctuary City matter, we're pleased to be joined by Gregg Jarrett. He, of course, of Fox News, both the Fox News Channel anchor as well as a former attorney. He's got a piece on sanctuary cities, so this couldn't be more timely. Gregg Jarrett, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, Dan and Amy, glad to be with you.
And so your write-up on sanctuary cities, and again, you have a legal background, you're an attorney. Sanctuary cities won't find refuge in the law, and you're talking about more than just Department of Justice grant money, aren't you?
Well, look, Congress weighed in on this back in 1996, and they passed a law that said that states and local governments and police departments cannot do anything to restrict the sending and receiving of information with ICE. And they can't essentially shield individuals who are wanted by ICE. So the law exists, and in fact it was President Obama's own Department of Justice that studied the law on this. The Inspector General issued a report, and he said that look, the practices of these sanctuary jurisdictions directly violate that law, and they are therefore ineligible for federal funds. And, of course, the Supremacy Clause gives the feds priority and primacy over such matters as immigration. It's literally in the Constitution. So President Obama decided he wasn't going to do anything about it, even though his own Department of Justice says, look, they're violating the law. we can withhold funds to force them to comply with federal law. President Trump is doing the opposite. He's decided to take action under the law.
I just find it mind-blowing that we're, places like Chicago, San Francisco, we're actively protecting illegal immigrants.
Yeah, and Amy, the tragic shooting death of Kate Steinle is really a perfect example of it. This guy, Juan Sanchez from Mexico, 7 felony convictions, deported 5 times, kept coming back to the United States seeking refuge in San Francisco because he knew it was a safe haven. And then, ICE finds out he's there. They issue a hold or detainer for him. And instead of responding to that, as all detainers require, San Francisco sheriff decided we're not going to honor it. We're not even going to respond to it. We're going to open the jailhouse door, let the guy go, and he killed Kate Steinle shortly thereafter.
Well, right, and so the Steinle case, and then there are cases that are real time right now. The rape of that 14-year-old girl at the high school in Maryland, this 4-time deportee MS-13 gang member from El Salvador who was arrested in Nassau County, New York earlier this week or late last week for sexually assaulting a 2-year-old, as well as stabbing 2 women, including that 2-year-old's mother. Shouldn't have been in this country. And it seems to me that the Trump administration is on the clock on this, because although if we continue to hear these stories, then we're in the same position we were with previous administrations, where you have the president and members of Congress all agreeing that violent predators who are in this country illegally should be ejected, and yet the stories persist. The Trump administration has to signal policy changes that are having an effect to eliminate or substantially reduce the prospect of these horrific stories.
Yeah, and politicians love to stand on their principles, and the only way you can get their attention and get them to comply with the written law passed by Congress is to hit them in the wallet. And that's what Jeff Sessions has announced he's going to do. That's what President Trump said he was going to do. And so you start withholding federal funds. Now, you can't just willy-nilly withhold, billions of dollars in federal funds. According to Supreme Court decisions, what you withhold has to be germane to the subject matter, in this case, immigration and deportation. But there's for a big city like Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, the list goes on and on, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that go to certain programs that are related to immigration. That would be law enforcement. Law enforcement needs those funds. So, you hit them in the wallet, and suddenly politicians have this sort of cathartic change of view.
Well, that only happens if they think it is more politically advantageous to take the money, which apparently the mayor of Miami-Dade did in walking back their sanctuary city policy. But de Blasio and Rahm and other mayors are essentially saying, we think it's more politically advantageous for us to demagogue a constituency that we need to own and not worry about a few $1 billion.
Yeah, and it's going to be a collision of interests. Politicians tend to do what's best for them, which is perpetuating their power and keeping their jobs and so forth. And so it'll be interesting to see how the public reacts to it once federal funds are withdrawn and programs are halted that benefit, the voting citizenry.
Yeah.
So, and this thing would likely be tied up in the courts for a while. First administrative courts, and then, the courts above that. The Supreme Court has weighed in on the withholding of funds before, famously, highway funds, and Congress imposing restrictions for things like seat belts and helmets, the drinking age, and all of that has been, and speed limits, all of that has been upheld by the Supreme Court as a valid method to get states and localities to comply with federal law.
And then late last night, early this morning, many people are learning that the mayor of Seattle, Ed Murray, is going to be suing President Trump over his executive order saying that, punishing sanctuary cities by withholding federal funds is somehow unconstitutional. Can you explain that?
Well, he's going to claim that probably under the anti-commandeering law that you can't deputize police forces, local police forces, to do the work of the federal government. That's a misguided effort. It's not really relevant to the anti-commandeering statutes and federal law, because you're not asking police to go out and do the work of ICE. You're simply asking them to give us information about the people you're holding. And so, that's a far cry from commandeering local police forces. And, good luck with that, Mr. Seattle Mayor.
Yeah, and it seems, though, with Sessions' announcement earlier this week, and perhaps other agencies following suit, that this is going to be a matter that persists, and it may persist in part because it's politically advantageous to President Trump. This is, from the polling that's been out on this issue, the Democrats are in the super minority in terms of these sanctuary city designations and their popularity.
Yeah, the more stories that arise either in Maryland or, the Kate Steinle case in San Francisco, the more, people are beginning to realize that, look, ICE is talking about, and the Department of Justice is talking about, serious criminal offenders. I have a list sitting here in front of me that was 1 7-day period recently in which these are the ICE detainers that were requested. You're talking about people wanted for homicide, aggravated assault, battery, burglary, grand larceny, rape. You're not talking about somebody who was jaywalking. These are the ICE detainers. These are violent criminals and serious criminals. And, these are the people that I think, most Americans realize, gee, we don't want them out on the streets. We don't want a sheriff or a police chief to open the jailhouse door.
He is Gregg Jarrett. He's a Fox News Channel anchor, of course, and he's a former attorney. His column that you want to check out at the Fox News website is Sanctuary Cities Won't Find Refuge in the Law. Gregg Jarrett, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, good to talk to you.
Yeah, take care. Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.